My boss fired me after stealing my wife, my career, and my kids. Then my ex smirked and said, "You'll die, broke and lonely. You deserve this." 4 months later, I opened my dead uncle's briefcase and discovered a secret worth $100 million. The morning my boss fired me, he was wearing my wife's perfume. I noticed it the second I walked into his office. That specific scent, lavender, and something warm underneath it. The kind that cost $180 a bottle and that I'd been buying Lauren for 6 years. It hit me before anything else did. Before the words, before the HR folder sitting on the corner of his desk with my name printed on the tab, before the look on his face that was trying very hard to be professional but kept sliding into something else, something that looked almost like satisfaction. Nathan Derek Calloway said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Sit down." I sat. I'd been working at Calloway Capital Group for 9 years. 9 years of being the first one in and the last one out. 9 years of closing deals that built Derek's reputation while he got his name on the building directory. 9 years of believing that loyalty meant something in this business. "We're restructuring the investment division," Derek said. "Your position is being eliminated." He slid the folder across the desk. Inside was a termination letter, an NDA, and a severance offer. 3 months' salary in exchange for my silence and my signature. 3 months for 9 years. Effective when I asked. Today. I looked at him for a long moment. At the silver cufflinks I recognized, because Lauren had picked them out at a store in the Gold Coast last Christmas. At the faint lavender scent still hanging in the air between us. At the practiced blankness of his expression. "Okay," I said. I signed the folder, stood up, and walked out of an office I'd spent nearly a decade helping build without saying another word. But before we go any further, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because the story I'm about to tell you is one of the most extraordinary things I've ever put on this channel. Loss betrayal, a secret that had been buried for 20 years, and a locked briefcase inside a storage unit that changed everything. Like this video. Leave a comment telling me what you would have done in Nathan's position. And let's get into it. My name is Nathan Briggs. I'm 41 years old, and for most of my adult life, I thought I understood how the world worked. You work hard, you stay loyal, you build something with your hands and your time and your sweat, and eventually, it adds up to a life worth living. I grew up in Rockford, Illinois. My dad, Gordon Briggs, worked 30 years at a machine parts factory. My mom, Patricia, worked the early shift at a hospital cafeteria until her knees gave out. We weren't poor, we just never had anything extra. First in my family to graduate college. Business degree from the University of Illinois, working nights at a call center to pay for it. I moved to Chicago at 23 with $2,000 and a determination that felt like armor back then. That's where I met Derek Calloway. He was 35 already, running a mid-sized investment consulting firm on the 22nd floor of a building on North Wacker Drive. Smart, magnetic, the kind of man who made you feel important just by paying attention to you. He hired me as a junior analyst. Within 4 years, I was running his institutional accounts division. Within 7, I was bringing in clients whose names you'd recognize from the business pages. And somewhere along the way, I introduced him to my wife. Lauren and I had met in Lincoln Park at a fundraiser for a children's literacy program she helped run. Non-profit program director, dark hair, a way of laughing at herself that made everyone in the room feel comfortable. We got married in 2017 in Galena, about 3 hours west of Chicago. Our daughter Vivian came 2 years later. Our son Cooper 18 months after that. By the time I walked into Derek's office that October morning, Vivian was 4 and Cooper was 2, and I genuinely believed that my life was moving in one direction. I had no idea it had already been rerouted. The first thing I did after leaving Calloway Capital was call Lauren. She didn't answer. I called twice more on my walk to the parking garage. Nothing. I sent a text. Just got fired. On my way home, we need to talk. She read it. I could see the 2 check marks turned blue. She didn't respond. I drove home to our house in Wilmette, a quiet suburb north of Chicago, with good schools and wide sidewalks, and neighbors who waved from their driveways. We'd bought it 4 years ago, a 4-bedroom colonial on a tree-in street that felt like the physical proof that everything I'd worked for had actually added up to something. Lauren's car was in the driveway. I went inside. The house was quiet. The kids' shoes were piled by the front door the way they always were. Someone had left a juice cup on the kitchen counter with a ring of apple juice around the base. Lauren was sitting at the kitchen table with her phone face down in front of her. She was wearing the kind of expression I'd seen before, controlled, prepared like she'd been rehearsing. "Nathan," she said, "I was going to tell you this weekend." "Tell me what?" She didn't look away. That was one thing about Lauren. She'd never been a coward about the hard things. Even this, she delivered straight. "I've been seeing Derek for 8 months. I'm in love with him. I want a divorce. 8 months. I stood in the doorway of my own kitchen and did the math without meaning to. 8 months ago was February. February was when Lauren had started going to a women's wellness retreat 1 weekend a month. February was when Derek had started scheduling our one-on-one meetings later in the day, always ending them early with some vague excuse about a dinner commitment. February was when I'd noticed Lauren laughing differently at dinner parties, freer, louder, like she was performing for someone. I'd filed it under stress, under the ordinary friction of a busy life, with 2 small children and demanding careers. The kids I managed, I want primary custody. You can see them every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. "Derek and I are planning to—" "Don't," I said. "Don't say his name to me right now." She didn't, but she didn't stop either. She laid it out like a business plan. The custody arrangement, the division of assets, the fact that she'd already spoken to a lawyer. She was thorough. She'd had 8 months to prepare. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, listening to the sound of the house I was already losing. The divorce moved fast. Lauren had a powerful attorney and the considerable resources of Derek Calloway standing behind her. Mine was competent, but outmatched. The judge awarded Lauren primary residence in the Wilmette House primary physical custody of Vivian and Cooper and child support at a level that consumed 60% of what I'd make if I found comparable work, which, given the NDA I'd signed and the way Derek had quietly let it be known in our professional circle that I'd been let go for performance issues, was going to be its own battle. Within 90 days of that October morning, I had no job, no home, and no daily access to my children. My friend Tyler Marsh ran a small IT consulting firm in Evanston, and he let me sleep on his couch for 3 weeks. Good man. Didn't ask too many questions, but I found a room in a shared house in Rogers Park on the north side of Chicago. 4 guys in their late 20s, a bathroom with questionable grout, and a neighborhood that smelled like lakefront wind and Jamaican takeout. 41 years old, paying $650 a month for a room the size of a generous parking space. The texts from Lauren during this period were businesslike and brief. Schedule confirmations, updates on the kids' doctor appointments, once entirely unprompted. "Derek and I are taking Vivian and Cooper to Florida next month. Just so you know, I read that one standing in the Rogers Park kitchen holding a mug of cold coffee, and I didn't answer for 2 days. Then one night, this was in January, 4 months after everything fell apart, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize, just 9 words. 'You'll die broke and lonely. You deserve this, Nathan.' I sat with that message for a long time. I didn't know for certain who sent it. I had my suspicions, but what I remember most about that moment is what happened after the anger passed, and eventually it did pass. And what was left underneath was something quieter and more dangerous. A kind of numbness, the feeling of a man who has run out of things to lose. That feeling, I would later understand, is exactly when life decides to surprise you. Raymond Briggs was my father's younger brother, 17 years younger, which made him only 8 years older than me. The kind of uncle who showed up twice a year with a tan and stories that sounded slightly too good to be true, and a way of looking at you like he was reading something just beneath the surface. He'd left Rockford at 18 and gone west. California, Nevada, Texas, Colorado. Nothing ever fully settled. Real estate, energy consulting, things he was vague about when asked. He never married, no children. He sent birthday cards with $50 folded inside until I was well into my 30s, then switched to calling. He died in November of the year before my marriage fell apart, a heart attack, in his rented house in Scottsdale, Arizona. He was 55. His lawyer told my father he'd left a modest estate, some personal belongings, a used pickup truck, and a storage unit in Cicero, Illinois that he'd been renting for 11 years. At the time, I was in the middle of the worst stretch of my life, and I forgot about it. Then in February the same month, I got that anonymous text my father called. "Nathan, you remember that storage unit of Raymond's? I remember you mentioning it. I need you to go out there and clear it. The facility's been sending notices. They say if nobody pays the outstanding balance by the end of the month, they're going to auction off the contents. Dad, I'm barely keeping my head above water right now." "I know, son." A long pause. My father was not a man who used many words, but he knew how to make the ones he used count. "But Raymond always had a soft spot for you. Of all the family, you were the one he asked about. I think he'd want you to be the one to go." The Midwest Storage Solutions facility on South Laram Avenue in Cicero was the kind of place that looks exactly like what it is. A long row of corrugated metal doors under fluorescent lighting, the smell of dust and old cardboard. A security gate that required a code Raymond had apparently given my father years ago, and that my father had written on a post-it note he found in his desk drawer, Unit 114. I drove out there on a Thursday morning in late February. It was one of those grey Chicago area winter days when the sky is the same color as the parking lot. I had nowhere particular to be. I had $72 in my checking account. I had a scheduled call with my divorce attorney that afternoon about why my visitation with Vivan and Cooper needed to be adjusted because of a scheduling conflict on Lauren's end. I wasn't in a great place. The lock on Unit 114 was a heavy combination padlock, and the code my father had given me. Raymond's birthday backward, he'd said. March 4th, 1968. So, 869-143 didn't work on the first 3 tries. I stood there in the cold, fingers numb, feeling vaguely ridiculous, and on the 4th try, it clicked open. I lifted the metal door. The unit was about 10 feet wide by 15 feet deep. Shelving units along both walls held labeled plastic bins, tax records, camping gear, tools, automotive supplies. A rolled-up Turkish rug leaned in one corner. A few cardboard boxes were stacked in the middle, marked in Raymond's handwriting with categories like books and Miski kitchen. It was at first glance unremarkable. The accumulated stuff of a man who moved around a lot and kept things he wasn't sure he'd need. But on the back wall, sitting on a lower shelf between a bin of extension cords and a folded winter jacket, was a hard-sided briefcase, black aluminum, framed the kind with a combination lock built into each latch, and taped to the top in Raymond's handwriting was a single piece of paper with a name on it. Nathan. Not my father's name, not a general label. Mine. My name. I stood there looking at it for a long time. The cold from the concrete floor was coming up through my shoes. My breath made small clouds in the air. Then I reached for it. The combination for the briefcase latches was the same as the unit lock. Raymond's birthday backward. They clicked open on the first try this time. Inside was a padded interior divided into 2 sections. On the left side, money stacks of it, $100 bills wrapped in paper currency bands from a Nevada bank. Each band labeled $10,000. I counted 6 stacks without picking them up. $60,000. On the right side, a manila envelope, a folded piece of paper, and a round-trip plane ticket, the kind you print from a home printer. The destination was Scottsdale, Arizona. The departure date was 3 days from now. I unfolded the piece of paper first. The handwriting was Raymond's. Slightly right-leaning, economical, the penmanship of a man who wrote quickly and didn't circle his eyes. Nathan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I set this up in case something happened to me before I got a chance to explain things in person. I should have told you years ago. I was waiting for the right moment, and I ran out of time the way people do. The $60,000 is travel money, living money a buffer, while you figure out the next step. Don't overthink it. Just use it. The real story is in Scottsdale. The address is in the envelope. When you get there, introduce yourself to the woman named Sandra Cole. She's been expecting you in a way for about 20 years. She'll explain what I couldn't. Everything I built for a reason. You'll understand when you see it. You were always the one in the family who was going to do something real, Nathan. I knew it when you were 12 years old, and you were the only one who asked me a question I couldn't answer. I didn't forget that. Take the flight, go to the address, and listen to what Sandra tells you. Raymond. I sat down on the floor of the storage unit with the letter in my hand and read it twice more. Around me, the fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere deeper in the facility, a metal door rattled closed. $60,000 a plane ticket, an address in Scottsdale. My uncle, who had died 14 months ago, had left me a message in a briefcase in a storage unit in Cicero, Illinois. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, stared at the $72.18 in my checking account. Then I looked at the 6 stacks of hundreds. Then I picked up the plane ticket. I need to pause here because I know what some of you are thinking. This could have been money from something you don't want to know about. A trap. Raymond's idea of a strange joke. I thought all of those things. I sat on that freezing floor for 45 minutes. By the time I stood up, my legs had gone numb. But here's what I kept coming back to. Raymond had been the one person in my family who seemed to see me clearly. Not the version my parents were proud of. Not the version Derek Calloway had used for 9 years. Something closer to the truth of who I actually was. And he'd waited in whatever form a dead man can wait for the moment when I had nothing left to lose. I thought about Vivian and Cooper. About Cooper grabbing my collar with both hands when I tried to put him down. About Vivian, who had started asking why Daddy didn't live in her house anymore, and who had stopped asking because she'd figured out the question made everyone sad. I took the money, the letter, the ticket. I flew to Scottsdale 3 days later. The address in the envelope led me to a residential neighborhood in North Scottsdale, near the McCormick Ranch area. Wide streets, low desert landscaping houses behind stucco walls, with terracotta roof lines not flashy in a Vegas way, the kind of wealthy that doesn't need to announce itself. The house at the specific address was substantial. A gated property with a paved circular driveway, olive trees along the perimeter wall, and the particular silence of a place with serious square footage. I rang the intercom at the gate. "Who is it?" A woman's voice measured alert. "My name is Nathan Briggs. I'm Raymond Briggs's nephew. I found a letter he left me with this address." A pause. A long one. "How long ago did you find the letter? 3 days. I came as soon as I could." Another pause. "Come to the front door." The gate buzzed open. Sandra Cole was 63 years old, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back from a face that had clearly been striking in youth and had settled into something more interesting with age. Composed, watchful, the face of someone who had made difficult decisions and lived with them. She wore a linen shirt and reading glasses pushed up on her head, and she looked at me the way my uncle's letter had warned me she might like. She'd been expecting me, but not quite like this. "You look like him," she said. "Around the eyes." People said that. She led me through a house that was full of art. Serious art. Not decorative pieces, but paintings and sculptures that clearly came from somewhere and meant something. We sat in a room that opened to a courtyard with a fountain in it, and the particular quality of light that Scottsdale has in the afternoon, gold and slightly theatrical. She poured coffee without asking if I wanted it, and sat across from me. Raymond told me if anything happened to him, he'd get a message to you. Eventually, she said. He said you'd find the unit. He was right about most things. What was Raymond to you, business partner for 23 years? She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. And a long time ago, before any of the business, he was the first person who ever believed I could build something serious. What Sandra Cole told me over the next 3 hours rearranged my understanding of my uncle's life completely. Raymond had left Rockford at 18, not because he was running from something as the family had always half assumed, but because he'd been running towards something specific. He'd met Sandra in Las Vegas in 1993 when she was a 27-year-old commercial property analyst, and he was a 25-year-old kid with no formal credentials and an extraordinary instinct for undervalued land. Together over 2 decades, they'd built a private real estate holding company called Clearwater Land Partners. Not flashy, not public, not the kind of name that showed up in business magazines. The kind of company that bought large tracts of land in the path of development 10 years before the development arrived, held them patiently, and sold at the right moment. They had done this repeatedly in Nevada, in Arizona, in parts of Colorado and New Mexico that nobody was paying attention to until they were. Raymond never wanted recognition. Sandra said he specifically didn't want anyone in his family to know the scale of it. He said she smiled slightly. He said rich relatives ruin families. He'd seen it. What's the scale of it, I asked. She sat down her coffee mug. Clearwater Land Partners' current portfolio after the sale of the Maricopa County holdings last year has a net asset value of approximately $112 million. I heard the number. I understood each word individually. Together they didn't immediately compute. Raymond's ownership stake was 43%. Sandra continued. He revised his will 18 months before he died. The entirety of his stake passes to you, Nathan. We've been in a legal holding pattern waiting for you to appear, because Raymond's instructions specified that the beneficiary had to come here in person after finding the letter before any transfer could be initiated. I sat in that sunlit room in Scottsdale with a fountain making soft noise in the courtyard and tried to understand that my uncle, the man who sent $50 birthday cards and showed up twice a year with a tan and vague stories, had been quietly building a fortune for 2 decades and had, without telling anyone, decided to leave it to me. Why me, I asked. He had other family. Sandra looked at me for a moment. He said you were the only one who would know what to do with it, not spend it, build with it. He said the rest of the family would be comfortable and then ruined in about 4 years. She paused. He also said you were going to need it. He said something's going to go wrong in Nathan's life at exactly the right time. I didn't understand what he meant then. I understood. Raymond had known or sensed or predicted in the way that people who see clearly sometimes can, that my life was constructed on foundations that could shift. He'd made sure that when they did, there would be something waiting. I didn't tell anyone immediately. Not Tyler, not my parents, not Lauren. I flew back to Chicago, sat in my Rogers Park bedroom, and spent 3 days thinking. The first thing I understood was that money doesn't automatically fix what's broken. I had nearly $50 million coming to me, and my children were still sleeping in a house I didn't live in, being taken to Florida by the man who had dismantled my marriage. The second thing I understood was that what I did next would define a very long stretch of my life. I had options that ranged from petty to catastrophic. I'm human. I'd been humiliated in ways that went deep. But I kept coming back to Vivan, grabbing my collar, to Cooper's face. Everything I did next, I did with them as the fixed point. The first call I made was to a family law attorney in Chicago, not the one I'd used during the divorce. A different firm, one of the top practices in the city that I'd heard of, but couldn't previously afford a woman named Jennifer Hartwell, who had the reputation of being absolutely methodical and slightly frightening. I told her my situation, all of it. She was quiet for a moment. Then the custody arrangement. Was it agreed upon in mediation or ordered by a judge? Agreed technically, but agreed under circumstances where my financial position made fighting for more very difficult. Circumstances have changed. Yes, material change in circumstances is grounds for custody modification in Illinois. If you can demonstrate stable housing financial stability and a genuine ability to provide a primary residence for your children, a motion to modify is reasonable. I drove to Wilmot the following Saturday for my regular visit with Vivian and Cooper. Cooper had gotten a haircut that made him look suddenly heartbreakingly older. Vivian had learned a knock-knock joke at preschool and told it to me 4 times in a row, with the same delighted expectation each time. I held both of them for a long time before I left. Within 60 days, I had purchased a 4-bedroom house in Evanston, Illinois, 3 miles from the Wilmot house, in the same school district, close enough that the kids' routines wouldn't have to change significantly. I paid for it directly. No mortgage, no contingencies. Tyler helped me furnish it over a weekend. He kept looking around the rooms with an expression he was trying to keep neutral. "Raymond," I said, because I told him the broad strokes by then. "Raymond," he repeated. "And then Nathan. Your uncle was secretly rich for 20 years and didn't tell anyone. He sent $50 birthday cards." Tyler sat down on the floor of the empty living room and laughed until his eyes watered. I won't tell you the custody modification process was easy. There were 3 separate hearings and a guardian ad litem evaluation. Lauren argued the modification was financially motivated, that I was using a sudden windfall to rewrite an arrangement that had been working. Jennifer Hartwell was methodical and slightly frightening. She presented a specific picture, a father who had never missed a scheduled visit, even when his own circumstances were precarious, and who now had both the stability and the genuine desire to be a full daily presence in his children's lives. The evaluator recommended shared physical custody alternating weeks. The judge agreed. The morning I brought Vivian and Cooper to the Evanston house for the first time, their rooms already set up. Vivian's with the purple lamp she'd specifically asked for. Cooper's with the train track that took up most of his floor. Vivian walked through the front door, looked around carefully, and then turned to me. "Daddy," she said, "is this your house?" "Our house," I said. "For when you're with me?" She nodded. "Process this then. Does it have a backyard?" "It has a big backyard." She turned around and walked toward the kitchen to find the back door with the absolute purposeful certainty of a 4-year-old who has decided this is acceptable. I stood in my front hallway and cried. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. The question people ask, what did you do about Derek? Less than you might expect. Structuring Raymond's estate transfer required making the company holdings and my ownership a matter of legal record. Financial disclosures, documentation, the kind of paperwork trail that reaches people who pay attention in small professional worlds. Word traveled through Chicago's investment community. I didn't spread it. I built something instead. Briggs Capital Ventures offices on North Michigan Avenue. Same strategy Raymond had mastered. Undervalued land in the path of long horizon development. Sandra Cole joined as senior advisor. Tyler ran operations. Within 18 months, 3 significant land positions in the Phoenix area, a Texas Hill Country acquisition north of Austin, and a mixed-use development on Chicago's South Side in the Rogers Park adjacent neighborhood, where I'd rented that $650 bedroom that created 80 construction jobs and restored a commercial block vacant for a decade. I thought about Raymond often during that period. Derek Calloway's firm experienced what the business press called significant client attrition over the following 2 years. The last I heard, Calloway Capital Group had been absorbed in what insiders understood as a distressed sale. Lauren and I co-parent functional, not friends. But Vivian and Cooper moved between our houses with the adaptability of children who know they are loved in both places, and that is the outcome that matters. Last spring, Vivian turned 7. We had her birthday party at my Evston backyard, the one with the big lawn she'd approved on her first visit. It was a Saturday afternoon in May, with paper lanterns strung between the trees and a cake with 7 candles, and her school friends running through the sprinklers in a way that made the whole yard look like a movie about exactly this kind of thing. I stood at the edge of the yard watching all of it. Tyler was next to me with a beer watching too. "Your uncle knew," he said. "He knew something. I said he knew you'd be okay." I thought about Raymond, the tan, the vague stories, the 2 visits a year, the $50 cards, the 23 years of quiet, patient building in Nevada and Arizona and Colorado, all of it assembling into a thing he would never use himself. I thought about the briefcase with my name taped to it, about the $60,000 he'd called travel money, like a man setting out a bowl of soup before a journey. I thought about my father's voice on the phone that February. "Raymond always had a soft spot for you. Of all the family, you were the one he asked about." Raymond had seen something in me that I couldn't see in myself from inside the life I'd been living. He'd waited for the moment when I'd be stripped of everything that was obscuring it. And then he'd left me exactly what I needed, not to be comfortable, but to build. He knew, I said. Vivian ran across the yard toward me with wet feet, and a piece of cake she was holding out at an angle that suggested it was not going to survive the journey. "Daddy, there's still some left. You have to eat some before it's all gone." I caught her when she reached me, one arm under her, the cake miraculously intact. "How much is left?" "Some," she said, which is the accurate and honest answer of a 7-year-old who has had more than her share. I ate the cake. The briefcase is in my home office now on a shelf where I can see it when I'm working. The letter is inside it along with the combination lock code my father gave me on a post-it note and the boarding pass stub from the Scottsdale flight. Sometimes I think about what my uncle must have understood about life that I'm still learning, that the things we're most sure of are often the things that are about to change. That loss, when it comes, be a clearing rather than only a destruction. That sometimes the people who love us most do so from a distance we don't fully appreciate until they're gone. Raymond Briggs never got rich in the way people imagine when they hear that number. He got rich the way anyone gets anywhere meaningful. Slowly, patiently, without anyone watching, building something one piece at a time with a fixed point in mind. The fixed point was me. I didn't know it, but he did. And when everything I'd built on other people's foundations finally fell, he'd made sure the floor was